The wildflowers are not his. This is the only thought that exists in the world for a long moment, standing in front of the crumbling gravestone, the worn marble, with a name he hasn't let anyone else speak aloud in a decade, seeing fresh flowers he did not place there. White wildflowers. The kind that grow in the broken places between stones. The kind that means someone was here. Someone else knows. Someone else remembers. How? He whispers to the empty cemetery. But the dead don't answer, and the flowers, fresh as this morning, keep their secrets. The vigil I found the cemetery by accident. That's what I told myself anyway, that I hadn't been deliberately looking for the most forgotten graveyard in the kingdom, the one tucked away in the crumbling part of the old city, where people don't go anymore because there's nothing there to mourn. That I hadn't spent weeks asking quiet questions until someone finally mentioned it in passing. There's an old cemetery out there, if you're into that kind of thing. I was into that kind of thing. The grave I was looking for was 8 years old. The marker was small, unadorned, the kind of thing that suggests someone important died and then everyone agreed to stop remembering about it. My sister. She'd been Omega, she'd been kind, she'd loved books and gardens, and had spent the last year of her life in a palace position she'd hated, serving an alpha queen who'd worked her until she broke. No one had fought for her, no one had demanded justice. She'd simply faded, became sick, died in the servants' quarters, and was buried in the most forgotten place the kingdom had to offer. Died and was left. I'd come every month for 2 years, bringing flowers, speaking to the stone like she could hear me. She couldn't, of course. But I could hear myself. I could remember her. I could make sure that someone knew her name, even if the world had decided to forget it. The cemetery was always empty. Until the evening I arrived to find someone already there. He was standing at the grave next to my sister's, an older stone, weathered beyond recognition, the name worn smooth by time. He was holding flowers, white ones, the kind I'd started bringing to my sister. He was standing very still, like he was trying to say something, and the words weren't coming. I almost left. That was my instinct. His grief was private, and I was intruding. But something made me stay. She was kind, I said quietly, not about his grave, about mine, about my sister, about the fact that I was here every month, and he was here too, and maybe we both needed someone to know we weren't alone in this. He turned, and I saw his face properly for the first time, and I realized I'd made a terrible mistake by staying, because I recognized him. Not from the palace. I'd never been to the palace. But from the way people spoke about him. From the way the city was arranged around his absence. From the way even his name seemed too large for normal conversation. King Aldrich. The one who disappeared into grief 10 years ago and never quite come back. You shouldn't be here, he said, but not unkindly. Like he was stating a fact about the world. Neither should you, I replied. Given that you're the king and all, seems like there are places you'd rather be. Obligations, matters of state, there are. But you're here. He looked back at the grave. Every year, on this day, for 10 years. Alone? Always, I waited for him to ask who I was, or what I was doing here, or any of the things a king probably should ask. But he didn't. He just stood there, holding flowers, like grief was the only conversation we needed to have. My sister, I said, gesturing to the grave next to his. She died 8 years ago. I come every month. Leave flowers, pretend she can hear me. Can she? No, I said. But I can hear myself. That's the part that matters. He nodded slowly, like I'd said something profound instead of just speaking out loud the thing everyone tries to keep hidden. Who are they? I asked, pointing to his grave. The ones you're here for. He was quiet for a very long time. The future, he finally said. Everyone I wasn't brave enough to save. The return I went back the next month. Told myself it was coincidence. That I would have come anyway. Flowers or no flowers, grief or no grief. But I went earlier than usual, and I walked the long way through the cemetery, and when I came around the corner, I could see him already there. He was older than I'd realised, not in years, but in the way he stood, like weight had accumulated in his bones. Like grief had made a home there and wasn't planning to leave. He didn't seem surprised to see me. "You came back," he said. "So did you. I always come back." "And now you're not the only one," I said. It felt like a confession, like I was saying something dangerous. He turned to me fully, and I saw something shift in his face, some calculation, some weighing. "Why are you really here?" "Because my sister died, and the world moved on, and I needed someone to know that she mattered. Because I come here to be angry in a place where anger is allowed. Because grief should be witnessed, and I got tired of doing it alone." "That's not why you came back this month." He was right. It wasn't. I'd come back because I wanted to see if he was real. If the conversation we'd had was real, if there was actually another person in this kingdom carrying grief the way I was carrying it. "No," I admitted. "I came back because you were here." He nodded, like I'd confirmed something he'd suspected. "The flowers weren't mine. Last month, when you left them here, when you left them there, I saw them after. I understood what they meant." "What did they mean?" "That someone remembers," he said quietly. "That I'm not the only one holding memory. That the grave isn't completely forgotten." I moved to my sister's stone and placed the flowers I'd brought. White wildflowers, always white. There was something about their delicate fragility that felt right for marking a life that had ended too young, too quiet, too unnoticed. "Will you come back?" he asked. "Yes. Next month?" "Every month," I said, "for as long as you do." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw it, the thing he was afraid to hope for. That he wouldn't have to carry this alone anymore. That someone else would show up, would remember, would stand in this broken cemetery with him and acknowledge that some people deserved to be mourned even if the world had moved on. "Thank you," he said. "You don't have to thank me. I'm here for my sister, not for you." "I know," he said. "But I'm thanking you anyway, for her, for letting her matter." The ritual A month became a year. Every month, on the same day, we met at the cemetery. Sometimes we talked. Most times we didn't. We just stood there, the two of us, bringing flowers to the forgotten dead. Him bringing white wildflowers to the grave with the worn smooth name. Me bringing them to my sister. And then we'd sit, sometimes for hours, and let the grief settle between us like something that didn't need words. He never told me whose grave it was. I never asked. Some griefs are too old to excavate, some losses are too private to speak. I understood that about him the way I understood it about myself. But I understood other things too. I understood why he spent 10 years coming here alone. Why he'd built his whole life around this one private ritual, this one place where he didn't have to be a king, where he could just be someone who loved someone who was gone. I understood because I did the same thing. I wanted to marry her, he said once. About a year in. We were sitting on the stone bench near the graves, the one that was so old the letters carved into it had become meaningless. "Your sister," he continued. I wanted to. She worked in my palace, and I noticed her, and I waited until I was absolutely certain I wasn't just being an alpha. He paused, searching for words. That I actually loved her, and by the time I was sure, she was already sick, and I was too much a coward to tell her. I kept thinking there would be time, that illness would pass, that I'd have years to confess. She would have wanted to know, I said. I didn't know that actually, my sister had never mentioned him. But I said it anyway, because he needed to hear it. "I think so too," he said. "But I'll never be certain. That's the thing about grief. You get stuck with all these maybe-nevers." I took his hand then. Not in a romantic way, though later I'd wonder if there was romance in it anyway. Just in the way you hold someone who's drowning, in the way you offer to be held when you're drowning too. The pivot by the third year, something had shifted. I noticed it in the way his shoulders held less tension when I arrived. In the way he smiled when he saw me, small and careful and real. In the way he started to talk about my sister, asking questions, learning her favourite foods, her laugh. The way she'd hated the palace but loved the library, because the books didn't judge her. And I noticed it in myself too. In the way I started to look forward to these visits with an intensity that had nothing to do with honouring the dead. In the way I began to see him not as the grief-stricken king, but as the man who knew my sister through my eyes, who loved her through my love, who had decided that her memory mattered enough to carry forward. "I need to tell you something," he said. We were sitting in the same place we always sat, the stone bench, the broken cemetery, the graves we visited like they were the only real things in an otherwise performative world. "I don't want to be the king anymore," he said. "Not like I've been, not like I need to be. I built my entire life around this," he gestured to the grave, "around loss and isolation and the idea that I could save myself from further pain by never letting anyone close. But it didn't work. It just made me more alone. And then you came. And you stood here with me, and you didn't ask for anything. You just existed next to the grief. And it became bearable." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I thought I knew. "I'm saying I don't want to be alone anymore. I'm saying your sister deserves better than a secret grave. I'm saying the kingdom deserves to know that I loved someone, and she died. And that broke me. I'm saying I think I might love you, in a way that has nothing to do with alpha instincts or bonds or any of the things kings are supposed to feel. I'm saying I want a life where grief doesn't have to mean solitude. I was quiet for a very long time. I didn't come here to fix you," I said finally. "I know. I came here for my sister. Not to fall in love with a broken king in a broken cemetery. I know that too. But you're asking me to anyway." "No," he said. "I'm asking you to choose. To decide if building a life together, with all of this, with the grief and the graves, and the fact that we will always be the people who lost someone important, if that's something you want. Not because it's expected, not because it's what love is supposed to look like, but because you decide it's worth having." I looked at the grave, at my sister's stone, at the white wildflowers I'd brought. "She would like you," I said, "not for being a king, but for being the kind of person who shows up every year for someone you loved, for taking your grief seriously enough to make it a ritual, for understanding that some losses never stop mattering. Is that a yes?" "It's an I don't know yet," I said honestly. "It's an I need to think about what it means to stop being just the person who mourns and start being the person who lives. It's an I'm terrified of what happens if I let myself want things beyond this cemetery." "Okay," he said. "Okay, but I'll keep coming," I added. "Every month. For as long as you do. And we'll figure it out together. The grief and the love and whatever comes after." He nodded, and I watched him release something. Some weight, some fear, some old expectation about how loss should look. The life after it takes another year before I move to the palace. Not because I was waiting for permission or because he pushed, but because I needed to make sure I was choosing something real and not just choosing to stop being alone. Because I needed to grieve my sister, mourn her, and then decide if there was room in my heart for joy alongside the sorrow. There is. It looks different than joy usually looks. It's quieter. It tastes like autumn and old stone and the way light falls on a cemetery in the late afternoon. It's measured in small gestures, the way he brings wildflowers home now, leaves them on my bedside table. The way we talk about her, my sister, like she's still part of our lives, because she is. The cemetery has more flowers now. He's had the stones cleaned, the names restored. He's made a small memorial garden for the forgotten dead, a place where people can leave flowers for people no one else remembers. It's become a pilgrimage site, actually. People come now to honour their lost, to leave flowers for the people the world tried to forget. My sister's grave is the centre of it, because that's where it all started. With a king who loved someone too quietly and an omega who loved someone too late, meeting in a broken place and deciding that memory was worth maintaining. Tonight, we're sitting on our stone bench, because I had them move it from the cemetery to our garden, because I'm the kind of person who holds on to what matters. He's holding my hand the way he does every evening, like even after 3 years he's still surprised that I'm choosing to be here. I want to do something, he says, to honour her. What? I want to establish a memorial, a real one, in the palace. I want her name on something that won't crumble. I want the kingdom to know that Ayala was here, that she mattered, that she was loved by someone who wasn't too brave to say it. I feel tears, which is strange because I thought I'd cried out my grief years ago. But apparently, grief doesn't work that way. Apparently, it comes back when you least expect it, dressed up in the shape of someone finally honouring the person you lost. She would have liked that, I say. I think so too. We sit in silence for a while, and then he says, "Thank you." For what? For leaving flowers. For remembering. For coming back. "You're welcome," I tell him. "And thank you for being the kind of man who knew that flowers left by a stranger meant someone else was remembering, who understood what that meant." "I would have figured out who you were eventually," he says. "Hunted you down, made it my whole life's quest to find the person who understood that grief wasn't shameful. That loss deserved to be witnessed. I'm glad you didn't have to." He smiles, and it's the kind of smile that only comes when loss has carved out space in your heart for something else. When grief becomes not the enemy, but the companion you walk through life with. When memory becomes not just a burden, but a gift. Epilogue. The flowers 10 years after I first left flowers on a grave, we're still coming to the cemetery. Not because we have to, but because we've decided to. Because memory, when you choose it, becomes something different. It becomes a way of saying, you mattered. You still matter. You will always matter. There are always flowers now. White wildflowers, always white, because that's become our ritual. Because some things shouldn't change. Because honouring the dead is how we honour the living. And sometimes, walking through the memorial garden we've built, I see other people leaving flowers for their own forgotten dead. And I understand that this quiet act of remembrance, this is the legacy. Not a kingdom. Not power or status or any of the things an alpha king is supposed to leave behind. Just the understanding that loss deserves to be witnessed. That memory is sacred. That someone can spend 10 years visiting a grave alone, and then someone can come along and say without words, "I see your grief. I honour it. I'm staying." And that's enough. That's everything. The wildflowers bloom every year, exactly when we need them to. And every year we come back. And the dead, at last, are remembered.